What does right wing and left wing actually mean in America when they're using this? It means Democrat or Republican. So can we do Microsoft Paint? Let's do it. So this is what a lot of people think in terms of leftism. What American libtard leftists think. So they think this. So here you have the political spectrum, right? You have here Dems, Republicans, right? They think Marxists are here. So that's what they think, right? Well, I'll just say that's what they think, right? But the basic idea with this is that you're on the same spectrum as the Dems and the Republicans. You're just more Dem than the Dems themselves. Or if you're a fascist, you're just more Republican than the Republicans themselves. Well, actually, this is completely unfounded. This diagram is undialectical, unmarxist, idealist, and American exceptionalist. Because the truth, here's the truth, and I'm not even lying about this. The truth is that when it comes to this little political spectrum with Dems, Republicans, right? Marxists are actually outside. Marxists are outside. They're outside of it. I'm just going to put it in the center so it doesn't look like I'm like privileging the left side of it. Because they're just outside of it in general, right? Marxists are outside. So when it comes to this fake division, okay, hold on. Give me a second. Give me a fucking second, guys. Will you bear with me? And you know what it means to be outside of this division, right? It means, actually, that sometimes the Republicans are correct. Sometimes the Democrats are correct. You don't have any allegiance to the Democrats on this side because none of them actually represent the truth of the contradiction itself. Marxists are supposed to represent the truth of the contradiction itself, which means sometimes Republicans are correct. They definitely are correct a lot of the time. Okay? Because you're outside of this. And now what does that mean? That means that inevitably you're creating a different political spectrum in which you probably will be on the left side, right? But you don't go out of your way to try to be on the current left side because this is the left side of an establishment. Okay? Supposedly. It's just the establishment. You don't go out of your way to appear leftist and just more democratic than the Democratic Party itself. Because that would assume that the essence of the distinction is contained in the forms given to it. And that's undialectical, unmarxist, and it's idealist because it assumes that ideas are what define concrete contradictions and material contradictions and not material reality. Okay? So, you need to really hammer this home. We're outside of this stupid division, and we can see past the partisan bullshit where sometimes Republicans are correct, sometimes Democrats are correct, but most importantly, both are wrong about what matters. What issues are Republicans correct on in essence? Political correctness, professional managerial stifling economic growth. They're correct on a lot of things pertaining to bureaucracy. They're correct about a lot of things pertaining to social engineering. And they're also correct sometimes on government overreach. They're correct on curbing back big tech censorship. I think they're correct on guns. I think they're correct on Democrats not caring about developing the forces of production, so to speak. I think Republicans are correct on what else? The Democrats wanting to be a party of social control. I definitely agree with that. What about Dems? What are they correct on? I think Democrats are correct just on the fact that there's internal contradictions in the American Republic, right? There are internal contradictions. There's problems, so to speak, right? It's not just there is a real racial divide in this country. It's not just an artificial imposition by the liberals. There is a real contradiction between Black America and white America. There is turmoil in the sphere of sexuality. The traditional sexual roles and gender roles have been facing a lot of challenges and problems. I think you could say that they're correct on healthcare. Social issues. I don't actually agree that they're correct on social issues. Unions, no, because they're actually reactionary when it comes to that. Climate change, no. I don't believe in the city of Rome or the whatever the fuck it's called and their agenda. No, not climate change. I don't give a. You guys know I'm a right wing reactionary when it comes to climate change because I reject the narrative of climate change as like this general climate change. It's like there are changes happening in the climate, and I don't believe in like some like narrative. We're destroying the planet, and I don't believe in that. Right? So, yeah. I think both, actually, in a way, both are correct and both are wrong. Both the Democrats and Republicans are just as correct as they are just as wrong with each other, as far as they're both concerned. Because the Republicans are correct about traditional values being good. But where they're wrong is that they're hypocritical and they're not able to actually successfully defend traditional values. The Democrats are correct that there's contradictions in the traditional values, but they're wrong to throw away traditional values altogether because of those contradictions. Dialectics is about being able to be a conservative in the midst of contradictions, that we can survive contradictions, we can deal with contradictions, we can accept that contradictions are themselves real and come to terms with that. Importance of public schools. Guys, I'm a hardcore, and there are Chinese theorists who have said this, and look, I'm about to get canceled again. Oh, Haas is a neoliberal, whatever. The truth is, there is an American establishment and rancid for bureaucracy in this country, which is stifling the development of the forces of production. The Chinese have said that one of the issues with America is its inability to carry out structural reform. Now, I'm not against public schools. I'm just for the structural reform of public schools. I'm not for privatizing them. I am just for structurally changing the nature of how things are publicly owned and managed, right? And by the way, privatization is not always bad, believe it or not. If you think it's always bad, then you're against Deng Xiaoping, and that's fine. But it is not always bad. Some things should be privatized, probably. But I'm not even someone who advocates for that because I believe we're entering an era beyond privatization and versus nationalization. We're entering an era where the nature of money is changing. The nature of work is changing. The nature of all of these things are changing, like UBI and all this stuff with the Fourth Industrial Revolution. What does it mean for something to be privatized now, right? What does it mean to have private property even in this day and age? In an age where no one owns anything, not even fucking corporations, because they're not owned by individuals. They're owned by employees, right? In the form of shares given to CEOs usually. China is moving away from private education, but they're doing that because they have a structurally reformed version of public education in comparison to the one that existed in the Soviet-style socialism era. So that's what I believe. America has a very decrepit bureaucracy that is in need of structural reform. I am not for conserving the American bureaucracy in the name of preserving social welfare. I'm just not, okay? I'm for a structural reform, cut the red tape, clean up how our government works, and yes, I am not for throwing the vulnerable on the streets and cutting welfare for people and getting rid of Social Security. So don't strawman me about that. I'm just for reforming all of those things so they work better. So they work better in actually fulfilling their intended goals, which is to help the vulnerable and help push people out of poverty. China's way of eliminating poverty does involve developing the forces of production and promoting economic activity. And that also means promoting markets. So that's one of the ways China does alleviate poverty, is that it just develops economic activity. It doesn't just like give people free shit. It actually develops economic activity. So you're for bigger government. I'm for bigger government and smaller government. I'm for a bigger, smaller government. That's what I'm for. A bigger, smaller government. What does that mean? The government is going to be way smaller, way more clean, way more efficient than it is now. But that also means it's able to be bigger because it's actually more efficient and can actually extend its reach better than it could before. So that's what I believe. Leaner and meaner. That's what I believe. Yeah. I'm not for charter schools. Don't get me wrong, okay? But the public school system is a complete disaster in this fucking country. And if you can't admit that, you're just not being politically honest. The public school system is a complete fucking disaster in this country. I want this country to no longer be ruled by lawyers. I want engineers and people who work with their hands to rule this country, not fucking lawyers. We just have a horrible bureaucracy in this country. I'm for more decentralization and for more centralization. It's not one or the other. But I am definitely for a government that works for the American people, similar to the Chinese government. Not the same, we live in a different country, but similar. Similar in at least that general respect. Look, what makes me a super lefty in American politics is I am for the destruction of Wall Street. I am actually for the destruction of Wall Street. Like the elimination altogether of financial parasitism, speculation, and the derivatives market from the country. Complete elimination of the derivatives market from the country. Complete definancialization of the country. The complete definancialization. The banks, get rid of them. The Federal Reserve, scrap it. That's what I'm for. A state bank. I'm for one state bank that are public servants. Absolutely get rid of the Federal Reserve. Completely crack down on Wall Street and eliminate Wall Street wholesale. Now, does that mean I'm against markets and I'm against, small businesses and I'm against local communities? No, I want more of those things to flourish, right? I want more industrial economic activity to flourish, more real economic activity. We have a bloated financial sector, and I want to go farther than even China is right now. I want America's financial sector to be completely eliminated. I am for the complete wholesale elimination of the financial sector. The financial sector is a form of bourgeois, capitalist, monopoly, capitalist socialism. Financial sector right now is a form of selling of indulgences of the planned economy. We live in a planned economy. But what happens is that on Wall Street, the financial monopolists coordinate with each other to get rich off of this financial planning and rig the system to their benefit and at the expense of the American people. All to preserve these institutions, these financial institutions. Yeah. So that's what makes me like such a communist in this country. At least like by the standards of this country. Is that all I want to do is destroy the socialism for the rich. That's why I don't call myself a socialist, by the way, in this country. Now AOC and the Democratic Socialists, they are the agents of Wall Street. They just want to use Wall Street's Wall Street to solve social problems. I want to destroy Wall Street. Yeah, in China, the stock market is less ingrained in every facet of economic society. True. And right now, the Chinese government is doing a lot to really, push back on this overgrowth that is the so-called financial sector, right? The people you want to look out for and watch out for when it comes to the rise of fascism, and I'm saying this unironically, I'm not saying this as a joke, unironically, people like Walsh. They are combining neoconservatism when it comes to foreign policy with democratic socialism, so-called, at home, which is a form of American chauvinism and American racism, basically. That's where you're going to find fascism come from. It's going to, listen, fascism's not going to come from people with pickup trucks and people who care about the Second Amendment and militia people or whatever. Let me just, please clip this and share it around wherever you can. Fascism will come from Reddit in this country. Fascism will come from Reddit in this country. Or whatever equivalent to fascism there is, it'll come from Reddit in this country. It's not going to come from these rural people or Trump supporters or whatever. It's going to come from Pokemon-loving Redditors who get hard-ons at the idea of going to war with China over Taiwan. Remember, fascism is about war. It's always been about war. The current CPUSA is lying to you and telling you that fascism is just about when you're a big meanie and you're Trump and you go on stage and you say mean things and you're not politically correct. No, actually, fascism is about war, and Trump was not a warmonger. He was less of a warmonger than the Democrats that the CPUSA shill for. Remember, fascism is about war. It's about war. It's the most important thing about fascism is war. That is I could actually say with confidence that war is pretty much the only thing that defines fascism. There's no meaning to fascism it's literally just about making your entire economy about war. It's about making the whole country about going to war. And by war, I don't mean defensive wars. I mean going on military adventures to save your crumbling economy. You have a crumbling and bankrupt economy, and the way you get bailed out of it is you mobilize your country for war and you go to war. That's what they're trying to do with China. That's where you're going to find something like fascism. So, you know what that means, actually? It's not that fascism is outside of this division. Fascism is within it. Fascism's going to be inside of it. It's going to be right here in the belly of it. That's where you're going to find fascism. Think about this, guys. Remember how I said fascism is liberal social issues and democratic socialism plus neoconservatism? Where do Democrats and Republicans tend to align the most on? Usually here in the center. At the center of the establishment, you have Marco Rubio, you have warhawks, who are also socially liberal, and also, somewhat democratic socialist at home. Yeah, it's foreign policy. That's what unites these two the most. So if you want to talk about where fascism is going to come from, it's going to be here. But the CPUSA isn't running on the CPUSA doesn't care about opposing the wars. They just care about fighting over abortion.